barely talk. And I remember it so clearly. Eric thought I was joking. He said, "Hey, Jerome, get up, come on, get up, stop messing around." And then he realized, he told me years later, he saw a little bit of blood coming from my back. And what had happened was I had been shot by some random person who the police never found out who it was. I lived in these projects that were huge. There were like 20 stories in the projects. And there were like, 5 of them on a block, so it could have come from anybody's window. It could have come from a side alleyway or something. The police never know, and the police, I don't know that they really put in that much effort to find a person because, quite frankly, this is the kind of thing that happens quite often in my neighborhood. And so really, I spent the next 6 months of my life in the hospital having to learn to do everything over again. For the first 2 months, I couldn't move anything like from my neck down. I could barely lift my arm. I couldn't write, so I had to learn to do all of these things over again. I had to learn to brush my teeth again. I had to learn to, pick my hair. At the time I had an afro. I had to learn to pick my hair. I had to learn to write. I couldn't even, I remember in the hospital, for the first couple of months, I had to be fed by a nurse because I couldn't even hold a fork in my hand or lift a fork of food. And if I did try, it would fall to the side. So I spent the next 6 months basically learning how to do everything all over again. And I was very fortunate. I had a wonderful team of people in the hospital who helped me basically have my life back again. They basically taught me how to live a life on my own with a disability, being a person who is now going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of their life. I had an occupational therapist. Those are people who kind of teach you how to do all those things like write, read, write, paint. She taught me how to dress myself. She taught me how to, comb my hair. And then I had a physical therapist whose job was to kind of build up my strength and make sure that I had enough strength in my upper body to do all these things. And that was my biggest fear. My biggest fear was that I would never be able to live a life on my own, that I would always have to have someone around to help me, to dress me, to feed me, because I was a very independent kid. I was someone who often did things on their own. I went to the movies alone as a kid. I often, took long walks in the park on my own. I was kind of a loner, as well as having lots of friends. And my biggest fear was that I would always need to have somebody around. And lucky for me, those 6 months in the hospital, I was able to build up enough strength and be taught enough things that I was able to live on my own. Of course, I got out of the hospital and I went back to live with my family. But eventually I would be able to go on to college, and I lived on my own in college. And to this day, I've still found that I've been able to travel. I've traveled to several different countries. I've done a lot of work on behalf of people with disabilities, trying to get people with disabilities to have more rights in this country, and also to kind of show people with disabilities in other countries what life is like. And I'm actually now working on a book that I want to, what my main purpose of writing this book is I want to show people what it's like to be a person with a disability in another country. I've had the pleasure of meeting people with disabilities all over the world, and it's really a fascinating thing to be a person with a disability in another country. I just came back. I spent Christmas in Kenya. I went to go do my first interview with a subject in Kenya, Africa, a young man who's a quadriplegic. And by quadriplegic, I mean he's like me. He was affected by all 4 limbs. He had a diving accident. But he's a young African who's a painter. And I'm telling his story. And I'm hoping to go to El Salvador in April to interview a woman who works there who was in a car accident. So that's kind of my thing now. I want to tell the story of people with disabilities because one thing I want people to know is that people with disabilities lead full, rich lives. We're happy people. I think a lot of times people see me and they think I should be sad, or they want to feel sorry for me, or they want to, I've had people offer me money in the street, like when they see me, because they think maybe I could use it or something. But I think the tendency that people have is to feel sorry for people with disabilities. And I don't want anyone to ever feel sorry for me. I want people to treat me, I want when people see me to respect me as they would anybody else. I want people to look at me and think, hey, that's a guy who's doing something with his life, because I am doing something with my life. And it's kind of wonderful that I think Honey was able to read the book and be inspired by someone like myself. And that's what I want. I want people to see me and think, hey, that's not someone to pity. That's a strong individual who's been through a lot and has something to share with other people. I feel like I skip around a lot when I tell this story. But that's basically it. I've talked to a lot of groups. I've had a lot of wonderful experiences. Just in early December, I was actually at a juvenile center, a juvenile detention center in San Francisco, talking to young incarcerated youth who are in prison in the San Francisco system. Many of them were in gangs. Many of them have committed violent acts themselves, and some of them even killed other people. And they were in, it was a very high facility prison in terms of they couldn't leave their cells only for like an hour a day. But somehow the librarian at their prison got them to read my book, and I spent 3 days doing a program with them where we talked about my book, we talked about some of the themes in my book, and it was a really wonderful experience for me. So this is one of my favorite things to do, is to talk about the book, to talk about some of the things that come up in the book, and to just really have a dialogue about it. I love, again, talking to people this age especially, where I think it's kind of an influential time. And I'll just tell you one more story about one of the themes in my book that was really meant a lot to people, to young people who are in the prison system. I say in my book that if I ever met the person who did this to me, which I never will, I don't believe, but if I ever did, I would forgive them. I would have no anger toward them at all, and that really I would hope that their life turned out well. And I say this, and I mean it, because I don't want to live with any kind of anger in my heart. I believe that probably the person who did this to me, who shot me, probably led a very difficult life himself. And I would not want to see that person punished in any way. I would not want to see any kind of retaliation against them. I would want them to know that what they did to me was wrong, that it changed my life forever, it changed my mother's life forever, it changed my sister's life forever, and it changed the lives of people who cared about me. But that I've turned out okay, and that I would hope that their life turned out okay too. I would not want to see any harm come to them, or I would not want to see them feel guilty in any way about what they did. I would want them to know, hey, what you did had a consequence, and I want them to always remember that. But I would not want them to ever be punished. And this went over so amazingly. Like, the kids in the prison couldn't believe that. Like I said, a lot of them were in gangs themselves, and their whole attitude was, nah, man, somebody do this to me, I'm going to get them back, and I'm going to get them back twice as hard. And we had these discussions about it. They could not believe that I would ever forgive the person who did this to me. And some of them actually, I think, were actually looking to be forgiven themselves. Like, they were shocked because they thought, hey, I've done something horrible to someone else, and I don't think that person could ever forgive me. So I think some of them were coming at it from that angle, but also some of them just couldn't believe. Like, their whole lives were about retaliation and getting revenge against someone who did them wrong. So it was a very, very fascinating conversation that I had with them about that whole theme of letting go of anger. And that's really what I want people to take from the book also, this idea that, something horrible can happen to you in this world, and you can still come out of it okay. And I think probably many of us in this room have already had something negative happen to us, or have had an experience that we wish we never had to have. But I want people to remember that, even these things can happen, but you can still, there's still a light at the end of the tunnels, and you can still go on to lead a full, rich life. A lot of it has to do with the way you choose to take that event. All right, okay.